now defining the nation's problems and searching for new solutions. Business correspondent Paul Salmon of WGBH Boston reports on an unusual economic approach to the nation's social ills.
Rainier, Oregon. 1,700 people on the Columbia River, which marks the state border with Washington. Wet, lovely, but like many American communities, as the millennium approaches, troubled. In fact, the county Rainier's in has just about Oregon's highest level of divorce, of alcohol and drug abuse.
We have drugs here, just like they have drugs everywhere else. We have kids with problems here, just like they have every place else.
School Superintendent Gene Carlson may actually be putting the best face on a bad situation. Just 2 weeks earlier, his high school was torched, presumably the work of local arsonists who've yet to be apprehended. The school now stands as a monument to Rainier's municipal malaise. Of course, like most towns, this one has seen bad times before, and like most towns, Rainier has tended to blame the bad times on its economic ups and downs.
We've been through boom and bust cycles several times, lumber, fishing, and then we sort of fell down. Then we went through a stage of nuclear power, which now we've lost through no fault of our own. And now we're sort of in a bust period and trying to work ourselves out of it.
But there's at least one person who thinks Rainier's decline was caused by more than the lumber business leaving town and no competition for the plant across the river, or by the idling of the nuclear power plant. A person who is drawing crowds across the country with his analysis of decline in Rainier and the rest of America.
Now, I want to introduce here just one bit of social science jargon, and I beg your forgiveness, but I think it'll turn out to be a term that we'll find useful.
Harvard political scientist Robert Putnam is the man with a diagnosis and perhaps a cure.
The term I want to introduce is social capital.
Social capital. Putnam has been telling community groups all across the country that this new economic theory is both the key to their practical problems and to the solutions. But first, the concept itself.
Physical capital is some physical object that makes you more productive than you would be if you didn't have it. A screwdriver. You save up your money, buy a screwdriver, you can repair more bicycles more efficiently. Human capital refers to an analogy between a screwdriver and a Harvard degree. If you invest in an education, you can be more productive than you would be if you didn't have that education. Financial capital refers to accumulated wealth on which enables us to make more money. Now, social capital refers to the norms and networks of our communities, the engagement of us and our neighbors, which enable us to be more productive. If you live in a community with a high level of trust and a high level of civic engagement, so you don't have to hire lawyers so much, you can be more productive than you would be living in a community that lacked social capital. If you ask me, what's the story behind this?
It was just about a year ago, at a talk like this one in Portland, Oregon, that the residents of Rainier became devout Putnamites. They decided to put the professor's theory into practice by rebuilding Rainier and its economy through a revival of social capital, the social links that once held the town together. And so they're starting from the bottom up, little piece by little piece, local project by local project.
The second one that I want to honor today is under business development, undertake riverfront public improvement projects. Dwayne, you've done a whole lot of work to make this begin to happen.
This spring, after 3 months of planning, was Rainier Day. Connie Budge, a Robert Putnam disciple, took stock of successes to date, recognizing volunteers, restitching the community to build trust, a vital asset, so the argument goes, in creating prosperity.
We will now go downstairs where we will cut the ribbon on our kiosk. Thank you very much. See you around town the rest of the day.
Connie Budge, perhaps Rainier's leading social capitalist, was bowled over by the evidence of a social capital crisis, as Robert Putnam presents it.
Unfortunately, the evidence of civic disengagement is all around us. Attendance at churches is down by about 20% over the last 30, 40 years. Membership in labor unions is down. Membership in what I call the animal clubs, that is the Lions Club, the Moose Club, the Elks Club, the Eagles Club, women's clubs membership, volunteering for the Red Cross, membership in the PTA, all down. Now, it's not true that membership in every single organization in America is down. I happen to belong to an organization that's had explosive growth during this period, the American Association of Retired Persons. I'm an active member in good standing of the AARP. My total membership activity each year consists in the 36 seconds, I've timed this, that it takes me to write a check. Here's the general rule. Membership in organizations where membership means moving a pen is booming. Membership in organizations which membership means being there, knowing another member, is declining.
Why the decline? Well, says Putnam, the causes run deep. Women who used to shoulder the volunteer burden have entered the workforce, and men haven't picked up the slack. Americans are more mobile than ever, giving people less time than ever to plant roots. The 60s generation, instead of taking over the responsibilities of its parents, did its own things instead. And most important of all, television, which has dramatically increased the ease and appeal of life at home, alone.
You're less likely to hear about it.
Putnam has a
Somebody's
final
less likely
piece
to
of
say,
persuasion for his audiences.
How many people in the room bowl or have ever bowled? Okay, good start. How many in the room are on a bowling team, bowling league?
As a teenager, Professor Putnam himself bowled in a league. So he'd been only too happy to meet us at the Playaway Lanes in Winchendon, Massachusetts, near his summer home, to spell out his ideas.
Bowling is big in America, you know. More Americans bowled last year than voted. And bowling is actually on the increase. 10% more Americans bowl now than bowled a decade ago. But bowling in leagues, bowling in teams, is off by about 40%.
Well, forgive me for asking, but so what?
Well, look, in a period when people used to bowl together and bowl in teams, these benches would all be filled as people were waiting their turn to bowl. And they'd be sitting talking and drinking their beer, and they'd be talking mainly about whether O.J. did it and what they thought about the Susan Smith case. But occasionally they'd been talking about the bond issue or how the schools worked in their community. So the fact that we're bowling alone represents one more missing occasion for connections.
Back in Rainier, the social capital movement is thus bucking some heavy currents in its pursuit of an economic revival, to be anchored by a new steel mill and a new marina.
Right in here is going to be a 200-slip marina. And that will be the centerpiece at this end of this whole vision that we have. Is the marina and shops downtown and shops here, and then the far end will be the industrial development and then the merger of the two.
This non-urban renewal, however, has begun modestly enough. Here at Waterfront Park, the revitalized Kiwanis Club has sponsored a community cleanup of major trash. But since there isn't that much major trash in a town this size, and given Oregon's bursts of inclemency, there's plenty of time to hang out and municipally bond. The Girl Scouts were also here to plant flowers on the waterfront and to spend their downtime singing Out of the Rain. Now, Robert Putnam would say that the alternative to this community sing is sitting home, isolated by technology. Is he right?
What would you be doing today if you weren't all here together? What would you be doing? What would you be doing?
We would be at home.
And what would you be doing at home?
We would be watching TV.
Is this better?
Yeah.
You think this is better?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's much better than home. It's much better being on TV and then watching TV. Yeah.
At Fox Creek, they were rebuilding the nature path and community through teamwork.
What they're doing in places like Rainier really matters for the future of their community. It's not just a matter of warm, cuddly feelings. The way our community institutions work is influenced by how connected we are with one another. The performance of our schools, for example, is more influenced by how many parents are engaged in school affairs than by our school budgets. The crime rate in your neighborhood is more influenced by how many neighbors know one another's first name than it is by the number of cops on the beat. There are even studies that show that there are health effects. Physical health is improved by civic connectedness. So both community health and physical health is fostered when we connect with one another.
Lynn Youngbar, an economic development specialist, introduced Rainier to Robert Putnam. We asked her if social capital was paying off yet. Is it creating new jobs, for example?
We don't claim to create any jobs. What we do is help communities build relationships among the people in the community. And if you believe this progression of, civic engagement leads to knowledge and information flowing through the community that eventually leads to wealth and the creation of physical capital, that eventually jobs will be created.
There are, of course, skeptics, and one of them was at the Rainier Day Church Luncheon, former Mayor Borgny Corbett, who doubts that the town will ever recover the social capital it once had in abundance.
1920, there was a company who wanted to come into town to put in a barreling plant. The president of the Chamber of Commerce found out about it on Wednesday. He went to the businessmen, asked them each for $1, and by Thursday they were starting work on the building, and a week later they had it operating.
So you mean that kind of interconnectedness could get things going just like that?
That's right.
But that new marina, says Corbett, was proposed years ago. Does she think it finally will be built?
I don't think so. And part of it is that a lot of people now, besides working a 40-hour week, some of them are taking second jobs to pay for the boat that they're going to park at the marina, and the money isn't there. And I don't think a lot of it's going to happen.
Rainier's social capitalists, of course, think they've found the key to rebuilding the waterfront. And speaking of social capitalism, here's the movement's guru himself. Robert Putnam had actually come to town for Rainier Day.
How are you?
Welcome to Rainier.
Thank you. It's
Big
great
city.
to be here. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you've been up to.
Rainier was hoping for the professor's seal of approval. Putnam wanted to see his theory in action.
Enjoyed your article. Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. Hi, I'm Bob Putnam. I don't mean to interrupt you.
I'm David.
Hi, David.
This is a high school environmental project to spiff up a strip of land near the proposed marina and get teenagers involved in the community.
Wouldn't it be the case, though, nowadays that lots of people would say, Jesus, I'd much rather actually be sitting watching TV or going off on my own or partying or something? Is this something that seems a little do-gooding, that is goody-goody, to be engaged in this kind of project?
I don't think so, because the kids see that, I mean, kids, you know, my friends,
Sure.
they see what we're doing and they're like, wow, that's really great, that's going to look good. It's almost like, they're thinking it's almost like a legacy, you know. In fact, there's one of the campers that wanted to help us right there. And so they're seeing this and they're going, this is a good legacy, this is something we want to leave behind, unlike, you know, graffiti or something, you know, this
Sure.
is good. You know, our friends see this and this is a good thing to do.
Tell me what the story is.
Putnam's next stop, Fox Creek, where they were laying wood chips on a trail used for education and walks in the woods.
We have people of all ages. We have toddlers here today. We had one toddler here that was filling a bucket full of chips, and Christopher Bender. And we start them young and in community service, and then we grow them up, and they become leaders of the community after that. I think that's part of the clue. And instead of fleeing when they get to college age, well, they think, well, I can come back to this town because it's mine, and I feel good about what we've done there in the past.
Now, as you may have noticed, the projects of Rainier Day are not only small scale, but long range, with economic benefits in the not-so-immediate future. In Rainier, however, they're also looking for payoffs in the here and now. Of the 30 communities competing for that new steel mill, Rainier is one of 2 finalists, its boosters say, because of its new selling point, the town's social capital renaissance.
We just cannot be as effective as we can be unless we're working together on the process. And that doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements. We have as many disagreements per capita in Rainier as they have in Baghdad, I'll bet. But the interconnectedness allows us to get past that, to work towards the goal, to work towards the vision of making this the best place we can make it, and not losing sight of the idea that we want to maintain our quality of life. And that's a vision that just can't be lost.
By now it was getting late, and frankly, for a business correspondent, a little bit gooey. But there was one question that had been bothering me all day. Aren't armed groups like the Crips, the Bloods, or the Michigan Militia also examples of social capital?
These forms of social capital, like gangs or Michigan Militia, represent forms of capital that respond to the absence of connectedness in the rest of our lives. But of course, it would be crazy to deny that those are socially destructive, in the broader sense, socially destructive forms of social connectedness. And the right answer to that problem is not to, certainly not, of course, to bless or praise those, but to find ways of supplanting them with more socially productive forms of connectedness. That's why I think that the forms of social capital that are most crucial to have are forms of social capital that bridge across the cleavages in our society, that bridge across racial barriers, or that bridge across ideological dividing lines, or whatever.
Meanwhile, however, in Rainier, every stratum of society has been involved in the social capital revival, though you have to admit this is a pretty homogeneous town.
We're all going bowling, right?
For all the good feeling here in Rainier, though, This story ends with questions, not answers. Is the decline of social capital really what's plaguing America? Can you really rebuild social capital? And if you can, will the payoffs come quickly enough to keep this new movement alive?